two levels, right? There's the output has increased that's required on both. So I've met that, right? But there's this extra little bit that I don't think even having met that expectation that I would be able to do if I hadn't kind of gone through this. So there's like an extra 5% on top of that from a business perspective.
Welcome to this episode of the Art of Success podcast. In this episode, I'm speaking to my client, Jackson Living, about his transformation about everything mindset. And we speak a lot about his discipline and how he trained that discipline, which is a huge topic for so many high performers just seeking that next level. It's almost like you need to learn to get a little bit more uncomfortable before you actually make progress. So here is Jackson, and hopefully you can extract a ton of value and start to apply this to your own life.
So, dude, welcome. Thank you for joining me. As you know, I appreciate you massively, and I appreciate you taking the time to jump on this call.
No worries, man. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. So, could we start out in like painting the picture of what was going on before you reached out to me? Because like we didn't get introduced at the MARCHON mental health thing, did we? I think we became aware of each other. Like, where were you at around that kind of time?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, it was basically I have been working in tech for quite a few years now. And I had just started working with MARCHON actually, alongside my day job. And I basically had reached this point where I was trying to ensure that I felt like I was kind of operating at 100%. I remember like the phrase that I used at the start when we first kind of kicked off was like, I feel like I've never given like 100% of myself to everything that I'm doing, basically. And this was kind of an opportunity, I think, where it was like, it's critical that I do. 100% is probably a little bit like extreme, right? But if I can give 80% instead of 50, it's a big win. And that's like after the talk, after MARCHON, that was kind of like, oh, this is maybe what I'm looking for. It's like, it was less about therapy and more about this, like, how can I kind of train my mindset to be a little bit more disciplined, a little bit more robust, and kind of work towards this idea of like applying myself 100% to everything that I do.
Yeah. Had you tried anything in the past to get the same kind of results you're hoping for?
Yeah, I mean, I've been through therapy, done that. I kind of went on a journey from like sickness to wellness with that, and then it didn't really help past that kind of like, being able to just be well with it and into performance. And then I tried a few things like journaling by myself and breath work and all of that, and it kind of just never really stuck. Doing it myself, doing it on my own, I should say. And yeah, so just all the typical things that everyone tries, right? That's like kind of in the fitness space, at least. There's like some prescription that where to go, but ultimately, yeah, just self in isolation didn't really work.
Okay. And what we're not going to do here is like dive into your use of therapy. But one thing I would like to kind of like ask you on is like, where did you see the limitation in therapy, and where did you see like the expanse beyond that in what you're hoping for from what we did?
Yeah, sure. So I think with the therapy stuff, it was like there was a moment, like a traumatic moment in the past where like it did kind of mess up my wiring from an anxiety perspective, and I had to get myself kind of out of that. And as soon as that like kind of fixed itself, and like I felt like, okay, cool, like this anxiety that I've been dealing with is now like something that is completely manageable, almost subconsciously. Attempted to push through into, I think, what I would like, I guess we can call it performance. It's like how do I perform in work and business endeavors and stuff like that. And I think the limiting factor I found with the therapy was that it was more about trying to like find historical problems in order to try and push forward through this kind of like performance mindset, rather than kind of like trying to, I don't know how I would say it, maybe like trying to play what's in front of you a little bit. Like it just felt too like, felt too much like just looking back too much, I think. And that's kind of like why I think it didn't work.
Yeah. Which is essentially if you're trying to release yourself from things that have been restricting you and really kind of causing problems for a long time in terms of mental health, especially. But then when we think about like, how am I becoming a new person? Then that's a different conversation that we're having.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's no longer about trying to, I would say, like, bring myself back up to my baseline. It was like, how can I push past that and then hopefully like maintain or retain some of these things that have like been beneficial in order to make me perform, right? You kind of want to bring them on as part of yourself. And I just don't think you can do that purely looking backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it requires vision and it requires development of new skills and it requires like adaptation to a novel stimulus. So like that is what you're providing. Like that's what you are seeking, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. One thing I should have done right at the beginning of this conversation, but obviously failed to do, was like, give us a picture of where you're at in life and what's going on. Like who is Jackson?
Yeah. So originally from New Zealand, spent kind of my first 20 years there, high school, university, studied design at uni. And then alongside that, did my PT qualification and worked as a personal trainer. I then decided to move to Australia at 22. I went over there and basically started my own business. It was a startup. I brought my brother on board, which was fun. And then kind of after about a year and a half, we met this guy from, I don't know if you remember it, but there was this tech blog called Mashable back in the day.
Yeah.
Basically, like just it was started by a guy called Pete Cashmore here in the UK. And so this guy, his name was Mike. He was the CFO of Mashable at the time, and he kind of came on as a bit of an advisor to me and my brother, more in life more than anything. And he was like, "Oh, you should probably come to New York and like see if you can have a crack at it." So me and Max spent a lot of time together in New York trying to make the startup work and make connections over there and all this kind of stuff. We did that for about a year, kind of between there. We visited London briefly in that time frame, kind of first time to Europe, back and forth with Australia. And then we kind of reached the end of this 2.5, 3 year journey of Australia and New York and coming to Europe and realized that the business just wasn't going to go anywhere. And so kind of we ran out of the capital that we had raised and we made this decision basically at that point to find where we were going to go spend, the next 4 or 5 years learning all of the skills that we realized we didn't have and we needed to be able to make a successful business. And there's something nice about that naivety, and it did, treated us both very well. But basically, came to Europe. I chose to stay in the UK. I chose London, to stay in the UK, so I got a visa. My brother chose the Netherlands. He was there for 5 years. He's actually here now. But I then got into working in finance, so designing financial applications, consumer products. Did that for 4 years. I was a founding member of this company that ended up getting acquired by kind of biggest asset management firm in the UK. And then transitioned across to working for another financial firm, which is based in Canada, which I still am a part of today. And then during that time, basically met the MARCHON boys, and I am kind of like on board helping, build the online product that they've now got. And yeah, so I basically, I guess to say what I do is a bit hard. Like I am a designer by trade, and just really interested in product and problem solving. So I basically think of myself as a person that tries to create products that people want to use, and just the medium with which I kind of do that through is design.
Nice. So. Nice. That's a lot of ground and like condensed into that. Yeah. Impressive. I didn't know about the Mashable side of things. Like who remind me of his name?
Yeah, so his name's Mike Kriak. He's basically he was the COO and CFO. He was down in Australia for some conference and my brother met him there. My brother's like this very charismatic individual. Just like everyone loves him. He's kind of just got a lot of energy. Anyway, he met him and then basically we just through discussions, we're like, we need to get to New York. And so he was there and he just really was basically like a bit of a mentor more than anything. Like he did advise a little bit on the business side of things and that was super helpful, but it was more like, I just remember I went to the gym with him like 3 times a week, every week, and we just spoke about life and yeah.
Did it feel like he was trying to specifically mentor you, or was it just like a?
I don't think so. I think it was like we just had kind of, I don't know what it is, and I've never had this conversation with him, but like we just got on really well. Both like fitness, and yeah, we just, I don't know what it was, but we just started training together and spoke a lot. And yeah, he actually helped me get my visa for the UK. So I'm on this like global talent visa essentially, which is just a fancy way of saying like, you've got a skill set that we want and you can kind of sponsor yourself into the country, right? Assuming you meet these criteria. And one of the things was you had to get a letter from a couple of like industry experts. So I just remember this is going to be perfect because he's like worked at Mashable, which is a big tech publication, and reached out and he wrote this like, very generous letter kind of articulating why I would benefit. I think the framework was how would I benefit the UK economy, which is very loose. But, it was just one of those things where it's like, I've just got a lot of respect for this individual who, for whatever reason, decided to take some time to mentor me, basically. I don't know if he would call it that, but I definitely felt like it was that.
Yeah, the serendipity of those meetings is insane. Like, there's a couple of guys in my life when I was personal training, and I was working for like, just like, it was like this fat loss clinic was the way it was phrased, which I always felt at odds with. I was like, this is like so against my values of how we coach training. But I was working there, and these 2 guys came in who were just like general gym goers, just wanted the accountability of personal training. And like, they were slightly older than me, but they just like had their shit together. And I had no idea at the time that like, oh, I'm resonating with like a part of them. And there's this like, I'm learning from them and they're teaching me. And I don't think either of us know that it's happening. But it's like this, like, and I look back at that now, like, I'm so lucky that I was A, in that job, B, met those 2 guys, because they were advising me to get out of that job and do my own thing, whilst I was in that job and doing that, and like working for my boss, who they knew really well and liked as well.
Yeah. It's those moments are just so invaluable. Like, and you don't recognize them moments until like well past. Do you know what I mean? It's like, good old hindsight. Yeah.
Good hindsight. So let's circle back to post Marchon. You kind of wanted to use those. You wanted to get closer to your upper percentage. I say post Marchon, post that Marchon event that we went together. You wanted to access your upper percentage of performance. What areas of life was that in? And feel free to share as much or as little as you want.
Sure. Yeah. It was a bit of everything, right? There's some fitness stuff, right? Like I've been training for the better part of 10 years on and off. Like, I was quite a successful like high school rower, won a few like national level medals and stuff like that. And then just got into the gym and never did anything that competitively with my fitness after that. And I just felt like I had kind of hit this plateau of like, I've looked the same, I've been as fit and I've been as strong as I am now for like 6 years, which was fine. But so there was this the business side of things, right? So like I had gone through quite a lucky and rare occurrence where the company that I was a part of, the kind of like original small team, got acquired for like a relatively substantial amount of money, and kind of felt like I lost my bearings a little bit, right? So like we had gone through this like 4-year like grind and hustle to get this thing to, not that we were looking for this, but like the fact that it occurred was kind of crazy. And then I took on this new job, and I also at the same time like started like talking with Ollie and the boys at MARCHON about their online offering, and I could identify that there was something so much better that they could be doing to capture what they do as MARCHON, which is just like easily the best in the UK, if not the world, at the type of training that we do. And I basically was like, okay, I'm taking on a lot here, right? Like I've got this full-time role for this financial firm, and then I'm also taking on this role of like, or putting myself into this role where I'm going to like now be responsible for helping build this, right? And if I'm committing, that like people become reliant on the fact that I'm committing to this, right? On both ends. And And I was just like, I'm not probably operating as highly as I should be, I think, in order for me to achieve this. And so I recognize that there's the capacity too. And I was like, okay, I need to make sure just basically to like ensure that everybody that's involved, I could live up to what the expectations are of they have on me, basically, and not to let anyone down. So yeah, that was kind of why I was like, I need to make sure that I bulletproof myself so that I give everything I can and whatever it is that I'm doing.
Nice. And then what problems are you running into? Were you running into problems, or was it like more of a kind of like, because I feel like there's two types of scenarios. It's like I'm hitting this limit over and over and over again, or I want to take out kind of an insurance policy against my against how I know I'll grow and be stretched when I get there.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both, actually. I think I was hitting a little bit of like lethargy and lack of motivation for a few things, right? And it hadn't become a problem yet. Like it like wasn't affecting my ability to do work. And like, I've kind of always had this ability to kind of just put my head down and grind a little bit, but I could definitely feel myself like feeling like I was getting close to that upper bound, or like getting close to that percentage I keep speaking about of like 50 or 60% of like capacity and output, which I know I could go further. And I was like, okay, I'm close and I need to increase that space so that I can go further before I hit that limit. So it was a bit of both. Yeah.
Nice. And then if you think back to, we obviously started working together, it was late last year, October, November time. What time was it? Yeah, it must have been
November,
around.
I think.
Yeah. Okay. So we started working together then. Can you remember like what are the stages that stand out in your mind in terms of like, oh, we did this thing and then we did this thing? Because like I've got my opinion of what we went through, but I'd be interested to know like what it what it felt like for you.
Yeah, I think the first bit I guess in my head was just like this taking stock kind of phase that we went through, right? It was like the physiological stuff, but also just kind of like doing a little bit of like just internal reflection on where in life I need to kind of push past. And I think I didn't quite understand what it was. To be honest, even when we started working together, I didn't even know exactly what it was that we were kind of striving towards. It was just trying to identify. It was almost like I know that I need to identify something and I don't know what I'm trying to identify. And so there was that like baseline kind of doing a bit of auditing. And then I think it was the next phase as we were going through the process to try and filter out what to identify. And then we did identify it, which like was for me specifically was discipline. Right? It was, I could do everything that I like needed to do from a operational standpoint or be high performing in business and that. But I lacked the discipline required to be able to just continuously do it over and over and over again, right? And this was around, there were things like, my diet was a little bit inconsistent. I couldn't be disciplined with not eating the sweet treats, with my time, with the energy I was kind of giving out. A lot of places of discipline, right? And so for me, I think those are kind of the big phases. And now we just completed 75 hard, both of us, which is pretty awesome, which I think was this like, it was a physical playing out of that identification of the need for discipline, right? And I think the physical is the easiest, right? In my mind anyway, for me. And so almost picking the easiest form of discipline, built discipline. And now it's like this thing that feels like it's just trickling over. And so that's kind of where I think we're up to.
Nice, sweet. So that like aligns really nicely with what I was thinking and what I was intending to go through. So testing phase initially to like put a pin in what it is that we need to change. And I think we got close to it with that, but we didn't quite hammer it out exactly. It required that this. Do you remember we went through a bit of like a vision setting, like goals, and like okay, what that looked like, what success looked like, and that kind of stretched you. And then we ran into those limitations, which was all part of the broader plan to find those limitations. Exactly. Nice, yeah. So it's been a process of discipline. What has been different to how you'd approach it if you were going to approach it yourself?
I think what one, there's like a little bit of accountability outside of myself, right? Like I think in order to cultivate something that you would like to identify with or whatever it might be, there needs to be a little bit of external pressure to encourage you to like stick to it, right? And so having that, so there was a little bit of like, there are a couple of moments I remember being like, Tom's doing this with me, and if I don't do it, I'm going to let him down, right? And there's like a couple of moments during those 75 days where that like creeped in. I was like, okay, cool, I have to do it. And then what I realized is that that talk of that like started to diminish, right? And it was just like, oh, I now need to do this for myself, right? And so, but I think doing it together or having someone help you through a process like that is like, there are stages at the start where you're ramping up and you're basically like, oh, it's going to be easy to just throw it all away for myself, but there's someone else. I will just do this, and then you get to this inflection point where your narrative changes and you go, I'm going to let myself down now, right? And then there was that mindset shift, and so it was like it was that I think having someone there doing the same thing just got me over that hurdle.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we have this like this image of ourselves initially that we don't mind letting down, and it's like, oh, I'm this type of person,
yeah,
and that's cool. I can let that type of person down. But somewhere along the line with transformation, you go like, oh, I'm not letting myself down, and I'm worth like the effort and the discipline and the focus, and that's the transformation of identity that happens in it. Cool.
Yeah, 100%. And it was a moment where I almost instantly recognized it occurring as well, which is kind of this, which is crazy that we don't, like, selfishly we should be like, you know, we should not want to disappoint ourselves more than anyone, right? And the fact that we are willing to like sacrifice or whatever it is for ourselves, we don't want to do it for other people. It is like, it's almost nice that we're like almost wired that way to do it, but it's kind of crazy that we don't identify that we need to be able to do that for ourselves at the same time. Like it is a strange thing that I think most people go through.
Yeah. It's a rarity to find someone who has that embedded already. Like I'm not sure whether it's a social thing, cultural thing. I'm not sure whether it's just the way that as a mass we are brought up, or whether it's like evolutionarily built in. I'm sure there's probably reasons for both sides of it.
Sure.
But it's definitely in there. And with everyone that I'm working with, it is that, okay, we need to take you seriously. Like, and your needs and your demands and your standards of success, like they're just as valid as everyone else's, and they're the only ones that you have 100%. Control over too. And also, if we're trying to help the people that you really care and love, then, well, it's best to look after yourself first, then you can provide.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't, like you said, you can't control anyone else's like perception or output of you, right? So you may as well control what you give out, because that's going to be the perception of everyone, and that's how you're going to help everyone. And I think if probably people recognize that a little bit earlier, it would be a good thing. But journey of self-discovery, I think.
Just a quick one, team. If you're not already subscribed to my email list, you're missing out on, even if I do say it myself, some of my best work. I create a bunch of custom email content, and it's the first place to keep up to date with any new opportunities to either join my coaching or just find out about free coaching that I'm offering as well, and find out when I have availability. If you're ready to subscribe, head to my Instagram and drop your email in my inbox, and I'll add you straight to the list.
Yeah, you have to. Like, it's a horrible thing, but you have to run into those roadblocks. You have to go through that pain of like, oh man, I'm really not holding myself accountable to the person I can be, and I know I'm operating at 50% in order to get, like, that's an important step on the way. If we are talking about like the changes you've seen, are there like there's subjective and quantifiable changes that we see? Sure. And I'm unsure like which are more important for everyone, but like what changes have you seen as you're going through this process, like now compared to 7 months ago or 6 months ago?
Yeah, I think a few things. So like from a business perspective, I think, or like a work perspective, I am providing more output than I was, right? So, and it's interesting because both like things that I'm currently like involved with require more output from me, right? So I would say that there's two levels, right? There's the output has increased that's required on both, so I've met that, right? But there's this extra little bit that I don't think, even having met that expectation, that I would be able to do if I hadn't kind of gone through this. So there's like an extra 5% on top of that from a business perspective, right? So like just pure work output. I'd say physically there's like been a change. So like actual like hard numbers, like my VO2 max has gone from like 45 to 49 in that 75 days, right? Which is like a big leap.
Yeah, 2.5 months.
Yeah, 2.5 months, right? And that's purely just down to the volume, right? And so that's been great. And I think the thing that's happened mentally that shifted, right, is like today, for example, I went into London for work, and so like I created this routine in order to get an extra workout in on like a Wednesday, which was like, it was meant to be low intensity, which is just a walk, right? It was intentional, but it was a walk. And this morning, without even thinking about it, I continued the routine and did it all this morning, right? So it's become subconscious to do that, right? And I find myself like now in my calendar looking for like a 45-minute block where I'm like, okay, cool, I can get a 45-minute workout in, right? Like I'll do that this afternoon. Whereas I wouldn't have done that, or I would have guilted myself into doing it. Whereas like I'm actively looking for those moments to put in a little bit extra now. Whereas before I would probably shy away from that.
Beautiful. Yeah, because your identity shifted and your beliefs have shifted. It's like who you believe you are and the type of person that you subconsciously know yourself as has changed. And like, yeah, that's
totally.
Yeah. And that's the difference. Like, because I'm guaranteeing you could have forced yourself to get that output, and you probably did on a consistent basis, pushed into that zone, but it felt like you're redlining, probably, I'm going to guess. Mm-hmm. And then you have the drop off and the fade out, and it's like, oh fuck man, I'm not disciplined, I need to be more disciplined, so I need to force myself, and you push back up and you have a drop off and you average out somewhere in the middle, as opposed to just releasing yourself and floating up.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. It was like on that releasing, that's actually like an interesting point. On the weekend, right? We finished 75 hard on the Friday, right? So we had Saturday, Sunday, and so like there was this like weird fixation that I also had with like closing all my rings over that 75 days on my Apple Watch as well, right? Like where it's like, and I have to hit 1,000 calories burned after whatever it is, 120 minutes of exercise, and there was a release that I had active decision to go, I'm going to end my streak because I know that on the Monday, I'm just going to start again as if this is just normal life, and I will continue to have that streak. But I was like, I'm just going to end the streak for myself to know that I can just do that because I need to, and I'm not beholden to this streak, and that's the thing that's motivating me. And it's only been 3 or 4 days, but like again, just close them. So it was just this interesting moment of like actively deciding to release that because I knew that I no longer needed it to motivate me through.
The backing yourself and the self-trust in that is such a nice feeling where it's like, oh, I know I've got this. Like, it's not this like, do I do it? Do I not do it? Am I going to live up to my hopes, or am I going to fall to the level that I've trained at? Like, I'm just going to crack on because that's what I've been doing and that's who I am now.
Yep.
Were there any challenges that you faced in this that you were like, or actually, what were the challenges you faced in everything that we've done together from start to finish?
Yeah, I think it was a hard thing, right? Is like identifying that you are not living out how you think you are, right? So like, what I mean by that is like, I kind of thought of myself as this relatively like hardworking, disciplined individual by maybe just like society standards, right? But I just kind of wasn't quite living up to that picture that I had of myself. And so doing a lot of self-reflection and realizing that you're not doing that is actually quite a hard thing, right? You're basically saying to yourself that, oh, I've let myself down, right? Because there's so much more there that I could be giving. And I've like, for whatever reason, over the last, however long it might be, right, 4 or 5 years, is not lived up to the expectations of myself. So that was really difficult. It was difficult also having like a conversation with, friends and partners about stuff. Like I do remember one moment where it was like an act of discipline where, I don't particularly like going out and sharing what I'm doing, right? I'm quite a private person naturally. And I remember we had this conversation where it was like, we were going out for like my birthday or whatever it was. And I was like, I didn't want to like tell my friends just not to share it online. And like, you were just like, why do you care that you have to tell them that? Like, is it going to make you happier and enjoy the moment more because it's your birthday? And I was like, yeah, it will. And you were just like, okay, just do it. Right. And that was a hard moment because I was like confronting the fact that I was afraid to do that, which sounds ridiculous, but like being scared of something so like minor, like in my head anyway, it was like this moment of, oh, wow, like I really am not quite living up to what it is that I believe I should be. Or not living up to, I'm not living up to the image of myself that I have.
Yeah.
And it sounds so innocuous, but like I did that and I just felt so relieved. I was like, oh, I can just tell people how I feel and that's all good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it requires a different relationship with yourself to do that, that shift in identity, to go like, actually, I am making it, because each one of these steps, each one of these actions in moving forwards is like staking it, is putting something that's drawing a line in the sand and saying like, I am this type of person and these are my standards and these what I'm going to meet. And whether that is like the macro across like 3 years of work output or training, or whether it's the micro in as much as like, this is what I want to happen around my birthday. And these are like, this is how my presence to be understood. Then like that is a hugely effective thing and one influences the other. So like, that's where identity comes into.
Totally.
Cool. Wonderful. Yeah, for sure. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think is important for this conversation?
I don't think so. I think we've covered went a little bit broader than I thought we would, which is cool.
Yeah. That's the way we do it. We start on one thing and then go on tangents. That's the way we do things, but they all circle
exactly.
around. Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Massively appreciate it. And following that conversation, we're going to ask everyone to follow you on Instagram. So I'll keep that quiet.
So I don't post anything. So if anyone does, I'm going to get much out of it. So